Hello. My final project presentation is on Age of Shadows, and I'll be walking you through its critical reception, its story, as well as the historical events and people that inspired the film. Age of Shadows was one of the first Korean films to be produced and distributed by a foreign company, that being Warner Brothers. Age of Shadows, aided by a cast of very popular and famous actors and actresses, had a good run in the box office, making back up to 6 to 7 times its initial budget. Age of Shadows was also the foreign film to be exhibited at the 53rd Academy Awards, and it was also given a fair 7s and 8s across the board by critics. For the cast, we have Tae-gu as Hashimoto, Song Kang-ho as Lee Jong-chol, Kong Yu as Kim Woo-jin. We also have Park Ki-soon as Chang-ok, Shin Sung-luk as Cho Wei-ryang, and Lee Byung-hyun as Chung Chae-san. There are more characters in the film than the ones I've introduced. However, I feel that these 6 characters are the main driving forces of the story from start to end, and not knowing about the other characters in detail will not impede or affect your understanding and appreciation of Age of Shadows. The film starts with a standoff between Lee Jong-chol, a Korean turncoat who used treachery and betrayal to become a Japanese policeman, and an unknown Korean Independence Force fighter who was trying to secure funds for the independence movement. It is revealed that the Independence Force fighter that Lee Jong-chol has been trying to capture is in fact his childhood friend, Jang-ok. Lee Jong-chol offers that Jang-ok can at least preserve his life by surrendering and allowing himself to be captured by the Japanese forces. However, Jang-ok is a dead-set Korean Independence Force fighter and says he'd rather die than surrender and be captured by the Japanese, and commits suicide by shooting himself in the head. But shortly before doing so, Jang-ok criticizes Lee Jong-chol for betraying his country and putting his allegiances to the Japanese forces. After the failed capture of Jang-ok, Lee Jong-chol returns to the Japanese police headquarters in distress, and he's assigned a new partner by his supervisors named Hashimoto. Hashimoto claims that he's there to help Lee Jong-chol, but Lee Jong-chol feels that Hashimoto is actually there to replace him in the near future. And after the failed mission of capturing Jang-ok with the addition of a new partner who he feels is actually his replacement, Lee Jong-chol feels that his back is against the wall and he needs to score big if he wants to impress his supervisors and keep his position as a Japanese policeman. Therefore, Lee Jong-chol decides that he is going to approach the Korean Independence Force fighters as a collaborator in hopes of being a double spy, so that he can score big and capture a influential Korean independence figure to impress his supervisors. The Korean independence movement is also distraught over the death of Jang-ok. Not only was Jang-ok a member of their movement, but his mission to secure funds was also top secret and only known to few members of the movement, meaning someone had sold him out. The Korean independence movement is also notified of the fact that Lee Jong-chol, a Japanese policeman, is trying to infiltrate their ranks by faking his identity and acting as a false collaborator. Kim Woo-jin, the interim leader of the Korean independence movement, feels that it is too dangerous to keep operating in Korea with all these things working against them, and suggests to their overarching leader, Chung Chae-san, that they withdraw from the country and wait for things to cool down by hiding and lying low in China. However, Chung Chae-san, despite the Korean independence movement being low in men, morale, and money, feels that Lee Jong-chol is the perfect opportunity that they had been waiting for, as Chung Chae-san wishes to use Lee Jong-chol as Lee Jong-chol wishes to use them. The dangerous relationship between Lee Jong-chol and the Korean Independence Force fighters culminates into a tense scene on a train, where Lee Jong-chol is unwittingly helping them smuggle in explosives and guns from China to Korea. However, Hashimoto is also there, having been tipped off by a mole of the Korean independence movement that the passengers are disguised Independence Force fighters, as well as the fact that the train is carrying dangerous contents that may threaten the Japanese occupation. Lee Jong-chol, from his conversation with Hashimoto and the intel that he received, figures out that there's a spy amongst them and reports this to Kim Woo-jin. And Kim Woo-jin smokes out the traitor, which turns out to be Cho Wei-ryang, his longtime friend, and unfortunately has to execute him for betraying the movement. Hashimoto is also killed after he finds out that Lee Jong-chol had been playing on both sides all along and impeding his investigation. Once they arrive at the train station, they find huge numbers of Japanese policemen waiting for them, who proceeds to either kill or arrest the majority of the Korean independence forces. Lee Jong-chol and Kim Woo-jin manage to escape, but is later captured when a different mole in their organization betrays them. Lee Jong-chol managed to walk free despite having been captured due to his pro-Japanese and Japanese policeman status. Lee Jong-chol, however, rather than go back to his old ways, decides for a fact that he is now an independence force fighter. This is due to the fact that he has seen his childhood friend kill himself in front of him after denouncing Lee Jong-chol's allegiance to the Japanese police, as well as the fact that he has seen for firsthand that the Japanese police were committing heinous acts of torture and intimidation to rout out remaining independence force fighters. Therefore, Lee Jong-chol finds a hidden cache of explosives that Kim Woo-jin hid before he was arrested and uses it to carry out the will of the independents by bombing the Japanese Police Bureau Club, killing and or wounding dozens and dozens of important Japanese officials and Japanese policemen. In addition, for the final scene of the film, Lee Jong-chol finds and confronts the mole that had betrayed Chang-ok and had sold out him and Kim Woo-jin to the police and kills him for the independence movement and for Chang-ok. The Korean independence movement rose out of the necessity to drive out the Japanese forces due to their inhumane treatment of Korean citizens throughout their occupation. Although the Korean independence movement is a general umbrella that many Korean independence fighters associate with, there are certain groups of independence fighters that were more popular and more famous than the rest. One of these groups of independence fighters was the Hero Corps, better known as Uildan in Korean. The Hero Corps was formed by Kim Won-bong, portrayed as Chung Jae-san in the film, when he saw the March 1st protests. The March 1st protest was one of the most significant events in Korean independence movement history, as it was an act of civil disobedience against the Japanese occupation all over South Korea, as well as pockets of Korean communities in foreign countries. Kim Won-bong and his Hero Corps became such a threat to the Japanese forces that as their size and influence grew and grew, the Japanese forces put increasingly bigger bounties on the head of Kim Won-bong, reaching a peak level of $23 million USD today. It is widely regarded that the real-life actions of the Hero Corps that inspired Age of Shadows was their Hwangok Gyeongbu explosives incident. The Hwangok Gyeongbu explosives incident was the Hero Corps' attempts to smuggle in explosives, guns, and other materials like the film into Korea via a train. However, this attempt was thwarted as a spy, Hwangok, sold their plans out to the Japanese police, which caused their plans to end in failure. Now, the incident is called the Hwangok Gyeongbu explosive incident because of this individual right here, Hwangok, the real-life inspiration for Lee Jong-chol. Hwangok rose in the Japanese police ranks quickly due to him selling out his independence force allies left and right. Due to his deeds, he was quickly trusted with the mission of routing out the remaining Hero Corps members and other Korean independence movement fighters by infiltrating their ranks. However, when he infiltrated their ranks, rather than sell them out and betray them, Hwang started helping them out, leading to his arrest after the Hwangho Gyeongbu explosive incident. During the trial, like in the film, Hwangho claims that he was pro-Japanese and was acting in the best interest of the Japanese police force. Although he is sentenced to 10 years in prison, unlike the film, he is released only after 1 year. Due to his confusing actions, Korean historians are actually split on whether Hwangho was a pro-Japanese or pro-Korean independence fighter. Though it is unconfirmed, Kim Won-bong is said to have claimed that Hwangho was a tried and true member of the Korean independence movement, specifically the Hero Corps. I think that one part of the film that stood out to me was the inner conflicts of Lee Jong-chol and Jo Hae-ryung. Specifically, I could probably understand why Jo Hae-ryung wanted to sell out his resistance members to foil their plans at the time, as there were too many setbacks and failures to really reinforce the independence movement. And rather than see his friends die at the hands of the Japanese, he could ultimately save their lives by discouraging further acts of resistance. However, I feel that Jo Hae-ryung's efforts were ultimately very stupid and destroyed many turning points of the resistance. On the other hand, Lee Jong-chol's ego as a turncoat and Japanese police officer is shaken after his childhood friend was sold out as a resistance member and has to choose suicide. And throughout the film, Lee Jong-chol's escapades as a double spy shakes his resolve enough times over to fully betray the Japanese police force and relay confidential information to Kim Woo-jin to help out the resistance efforts, which ultimately culminates into a bombing at the police bureau club. Ultimately, I think that the quote, "a spy only has one motherland," by Jung Chae-san rings true throughout the film, as even if you're as treacherous as Lee Jong-chol and approach the resistance with ill intent, it is ultimately impossible to betray your heart and soul as a Korean once personal feelings get involved.